Welcome, everyone. Sorry it's so early in the morning, and welcome to our nightmare, digital and VOD landscape. I had wanted everyone to sit boy, girl, but it didn't quite work out, so we'll go through the panel in a different order. I'm Wendy Bernfeld, and just to introduce a little bit the overview of today, can we go to the next slide, please? If there is a next slide. Essentially, we're going to begin with maybe 10 minutes of overview of the digital landscape today, a snapshot of who's out there buying, in what business model and what genre, other than the big five. It's okay for the next slide, thank you. So the first part is the landscape and business models and some of the stuff that you're interested in about who you can sell to beyond the ones you already know. And the second part, the more interesting part, is the panel. People out in the trenches buying and launching platforms or expanding to different regions. Let's go to the next slide. So the panelists, who you'll meet shortly and they'll introduce themselves, are Dragoslav from EuroVOD. We have Sebastian from Wacky, who just joined shortly because before that he was with iTunes Movies in Europe. And we have William from the UK, who's launched FilmDo, which is a film service in the UK. And we have a guest from Colombia, Online Colombia, who will speak as well. We'll go through all of them shortly, but let's jump ahead. Next slide, please. So the landscape, a bit of a maze. If you flip slides, next slide, please. Just to get it out of the way, because people always ask, to quickly run through the buzzwords, and the reason we care is just because they affect money and audience. So when people are asking for rights for VOD, if you remember not to think of it as one thing anymore. There are many different VODs, all in different windows with different prices and deal models. So TVOD is transactional, pay-per-view basically, like in iTunes. AdVOD is when you put stuff up on the web for free to the consumer, but you make money from it, from advertising or sponsorship. That's the catch. SVOD, subscription VOD, you'll hear that we're talking about two types. The subscription VOD that is a monthly fee that's usually non-exclusive, like Netflix. And then there's the premium exclusive SVOD, often tied to pay TV subscriptions, like Canal Plus or B-Sky B. Electronic sell-through or download to own is the old home video sell-through. It's a consumer buying forever. And Ultra VOD is just the newer innovations, controversial or not, of putting films online before they're in the cinema, either accidentally or on purpose, for marketing or for money, and we'll go through that. After I finished my spiel, we are hoping that the takeaway for you is a simple conclusion of not just stopping at one deal. If you do one deal, or your distributor or your sales agent does one thing, iTunes or Netflix, given that this market is 90% non-exclusive with occasional exceptions, the more deals you can do in the same windows in different countries, the better. So it's not so much about choosing which platform and spending a year trying to decide the strategy, but rather getting your film out there in different ways. The consumer will find it from one of many sources other than pirated, license away. And let's go to the next slide. So people were asking for examples other than iTunes, Netflix, Hulu, PlayStation, and Xbox. You know, who are some other examples just in the pay-per-view space? You have a current film, you want to release it, you are or are not doing an iTunes deal. So for example, in Holland, Videoland, they also have an SVOD, Videoland Plus. Wacky will speak shortly about their own. Orange in France, Canal Plus, Yuzi Pathé in Holland, which is a cinema chain, runs pay-per-view and download to own. So they'll buy films from all over the world for TVOD. We Are Colony is a new indie site that focuses on art house and festival. It's in the States. Maxdome, of course, in Germany. I mean, these are just examples. There are many more that I'll show at the end. Flimit, one of the members of Euro VOD in Austria. Filmdo, of course, who's on our panel. Canada Screens has just launched for docs and Canadian indie film a pay-per-view or TVOD site that is not only Canadian films, but they'll buy third-party stuff as well. And TF1 just recently launched an e-cinema where they're putting certain films that were not theatrically released online on a pay-per-view basis. The same examples, I won't go through them all because I don't want to waste too much of our time, but some of the examples in download to own, electronic sell-through, include the Video Star, Vimeo On Demand. Vimeo you used to think of as only a DIY tool, but now they're also offering programming and soon launching a subscription VOD. Oh, that's one of the points to keep in mind. Whatever the snapshot is today, it shifts, morphs, and changes. If you've submitted a film to someone, they haven't taken it, and the reason for not taking it is not that they hate your film, but just that it's not their current business model or they've already bought up. You may find that the window's open again for you 6 months later, or in reverse. I mean, when Viewster was buying art house and festival films, or we were buying for them, at a certain point later they stopped and switched to anime and series. So you have to always keep current. It's very different than the free television or theatrical long cycles of buying. The cycles in VOD are quite short and shift and flex depending on the reactions from consumers. Next slide, please. AdVOD. So AdVOD, aside from YouTube, where you can get zillions of views, but maybe a very small check, CPMs might be $6 or $10 CPM. There are other sites that have less views, but focus on premium rate CPMs if they can do it. Viewster in 27 countries, Daily Motion, which is a subsidiary of Orange, and My Video in Germany. These are just examples of people that will buy older library for AdVOD. Some of them pay upfronts or flat fees. Most of them are on RevShare. But when you have a library that's sitting on a shelf anyway, this is a new way to get things going. One of the lesser known facts about AdVOD, which is interesting for you, is we were shocked a few years ago to find that older library put on AdVOD often led to a double or a tripling of download to own the next day on iTunes. And we did some research and experiments where sometimes people don't recognize the name of the film, so they don't buy it today. But when they've seen it on a stream, free, if they really love it, they then want it on their iPad or they want to buy it. And so it leads not to a rental, but a sale. Kind of an interesting accidental effect that sometimes occurs with films and series. It also helps people who are, if you're in season 9 of Doctor Who, but your kids have only started lately, you may want to go back to AdVOD season 1 and then upgrade them to other models after. Next slide, please. So in the SVOD, all I wanted to point out here is 2 different types. The first one, the non-exclusive, aside from a Netflix, for those of you who are documentary filmmakers, Curiosity Stream or nonfiction series just launched this year. A lot of these are from 2015. The ex-founder of Discovery founded a nonfiction only site for, and they are SVOD in the States. Similarly, Excite.nl, .tv, which is a similar competitor. Fandor for art house and festival only in the States. Mubi you already know. Watch Ever in Germany. Amazon Prime has made great traction in Germany compared to the past. In Holland, weirdly, some free TV operators So you think of making a free TV sale, have started SVOD, over the top, Videoland Plus. Similarly in Australia, right, where the Nine Network began an SVOD service called Stan. So all of a sudden you have players entering Snap in Germany, Hulu Plus. So when you're doing one deal, maybe you can do 10, 7. Okay, next slide, please. The other type of SVOD is just to point out that when people are asking you or your rights for SVOD, be careful. These are the exclusive ones usually that are tied to a main screen on pay TV. And that doesn't mean you can't do both. You just have to be very careful with windowing. And what's more interesting, and only in 2015 and late 2014, is what I called item 3, the hybrids. This is where telecoms, cinemas, and television networks are fighting back against online platforms, afraid of losing share, so they start services of their own, often in SVOD. So in Canada, Rogers began Show Me and Bell began Crave. Often they have weird names, but they're new buyers. They put money on the table and they're non-exclusive. In some telecoms or cable companies like Liberty Global started in Switzerland and Holland MyPrime, which is the same price as Netflix, the $7 a month, but their catch is that they make it available to anyone, whether they're a subscriber or not, but you have to have their set-top box. So whether that's a wise idea or not, that's an example. And some of the formerly exclusive ones like HBO have now, as you know, gone over the top to people whether or not they are subscribers to the main service. Next slide, please, and then we're almost done. So the last 2 slides about who's out there buying, I'm not going through. I'm just giving you an example that aside from that and the gentleman in the room, the first slide, in a kind of helicopter view, some of these guys will also fund. Next slide, please. The first one is just other general entertainment buyers, and that's more mainstream from all over the world, the left side being North America, the right side international. People like Youku in China or SF in Sweden, they'll all buy depending on the film or series. And next slide, please. And this is the more interesting one maybe for most of you, indies, docs, festival, and foreign language. Increasingly platforms are open to foreign language. They used to require dubs or subtitles, but now they sometimes will accept only English or subtitled versions and just build it into the price of the deal. So some of the barriers you used to face aren't necessarily there anymore. I would say that some of the new SVODs are thematic. There's been a big push for thematic, like Con TV, for the gaming and edgy and sci-fi sector, doc-specific, art house-specific. So they're not mainstream anymore, so even if a big platform isn't necessarily buying, some of the thematic ones will feature and promote. Next slide. So now, that should be the end of my talk, and let's switch over to the guys in the trenches. I'd like to begin with Euro VOD, Dragislav. Maybe you could introduce. Oh, and just to clarify, for the next while, each of them will give a short introduction, 5 minutes or so, no more PowerPoints, and then we are Q&Aing with each other and debating, and also from the audience. I've put a mic over here at the front, so if at any time after the introductions you want to start asking questions, the mic will be here and will increasingly engage with you. But go ahead, Dragislav.
Thank you, Wendy. Hello, everybody. I will speak about video on demand from the perspective of the independents. EuroVOD is a very particular project. It's a network of various video on demand platforms based in several European countries. At the moment, we are active in France with Universiné France, Universiné Belgium, Volta in Ireland, Lucino in Switzerland, Flimit in Austria, Filmin in Spain, Net Cinema in Bulgaria, and we also have partners in Sweden, a project for a video-on-demand service in Italy, in Luxembourg, The idea is to cover little by little the whole of Europe. The very specific thing about these platforms is the fact that they all belong to groupings of rights holders, independent producers, distributors, sales agents, DVD publishers. And in a way, these platforms represent the digital arm of the businesses of these independent rights holders who supply films to the platforms. We share, in a way, the same DNA. We have a very similar editorial line, a very similar approach to films. We are specialized in independent films, art house films, and since we love them, we do what's necessary according to our views, how to promote, how to bring these films, which are sometimes a bit more demanding and not that known, to the right audience. What is interesting to know is that in this network, which we've created 5 years ago with the objective of benchmarking the best practices in this market, which was at that time the growing market. We developed some initiatives for research and development. We mutualize resources, we pool resources, so that we could attain cost efficiency and some economies of scale. All of the platforms are startup companies, small companies with limited financial resources. We face huge competition from the big five and also from VOD services of telecom companies and others. So the only way of surviving in this very tough and competitive environment is to work together, to be united. At the same time, since Europe is a fragmented market in terms of languages, economies, cultural specificities, it's necessary to work on two levels, a local one and global one. On the global side, we mutualize costs on everything that is technology. We do multi-territorial deals, but on a local level, we adapt the marketing strategies, the editorial push that each platform does to present the films, to market them accordingly to the expectations and specificities of each market. So basically, this is the idea. We work together and we adapt our approach to each market. Just to give you an idea of who is behind these platforms, in France, there are 50 shareholders of Univers Ciné France, which represent La Fine Fleur, the main independent producers and distributors in the country. They produce and distribute large part of the films in France. The French state is also a shareholder of the company. In Belgium, among the 35 shareholders are the Dardenne brothers. In Spain, among the 10 shareholders are the Almodovar brothers, and so on and so on. Element Pictures is running in Ireland the Volta VOD platform. Element is the main distributor in the country, also co-producer of a Palme d'Or film. And so all of these companies, they supply to the platforms films of very high artistic quality. To give you an example, since in France we belong to rights holders, they know us, they trust us, we can close deals not only for the French service, but also for the services of our partners in the other European countries, which means that we bring to films the possibility to be exposed to a larger audience.
Just to jumping in to clarify, first of all, your model is pay-per-view in every case, or some exceptions?
It actually depends. Since we always adapt to the specificities of the markets, for instance, in France, it's TVOD, because this is what makes sense, given the fact that in France there is a very strict media chronology, and SVOD has not been an interesting business model to develop until now, but things are slightly changing. In Spain, for instance, it's a very different situation. So there, the Spanish platform Filmin has TVOD and also SVOD. And you can, of course, imagine that the target audience is not exactly the same, because in Spain, they're mostly young people who consume online and on their PCs or Macs. So SVOD, they don't have much money, they have lots of time, they can pay a small amount of money and have access to a big catalog of films. In France, for instance, the target audience is different. Average age 35 to 40, higher social category, mostly urban, people who prefer to watch films on their TV set, meaning that the major part of the revenues comes not from OTT, but from IPTV exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why some of our platforms have concluded deals also with other providers, like the main telecom companies in France, in Belgium, same in Austria. We have applications for connected TVs, also for mobile devices, because it's extremely important to be available on all of the screens and devices today. But again, we adapt to the specificities of each market.
And the buying is done by each of your member companies with a local buyer, but also something central from you?
Yes, there are two possibilities. We do acquire films on a national, local basis when dealing with producers or distributors, and we also can deal globally. We have one negotiation, one contract, one signature, and we can provide the film to several platforms when the rights are available. So in this case, we work mostly with producers or sales agents.
Okay, we're going to come back, of course, and drill in. Let's hear maybe from William at FilmDo in the UK.
Hi there. Hi everyone. Good morning. My name's William Page. I'm one of the co-founders of FilmDo. We are a TVOD platform, so we're focused on pay-per-view. We launched relatively recently, just a few months ago, and we're quite unusual in the sense that we are focusing exclusively on international films and on independent films. So we currently have about 500 to 600 films, and we're going to move up to about 1,000 by the end of the year. What we're trying to do that's a little bit different is we are focusing on three key, we call that our three C's. So unique content, curation, and community. So what we do when it comes to the unique content is we already have distribution agreements with distributors, with sales agents, and with filmmakers at every part of the chain. And what that means is we have some content which isn't available on other platforms, but it also means that we segment our audience and we focus on content that we think is relevant to the people who are already members of the platform. And we think that's really key. With regards to curation, we are my co-founder and I are not, well, I'm not a film person by background, although I did want to be a director when I was younger. My co-founder does have some film experience, and a lot of our team do. But what it means is that because a lot of our team aren't film people per se, we bring an outside view in relation to a consumer view in relation to how people consume entertainment, how we want to discover films. So what we're doing is we're focusing on developing some really quite cool and interesting, the geek in me says that, technology to help drive curation, to help people discover films. So when we receive films, what we're looking at doing now is trying to curate those films properly, to give them a wider voice and to help users discover those films in a way that some of the other more traditional VOD platforms, older ones, maybe don't do. The third area where we're really passionate is around the concept of community. I think as filmmakers and all the way through the chain, you really need to identify who you're making your film for and who your community is. And what we are trying to do is develop that concept further and try and really empower the community and get them involved in the film discovery process and really get them passionate about the films that they're seeing so that they become ambassadors for the film that they really love. Maybe it deals with an issue that they feel passionately about, or maybe it's a country that they absolutely adore. And it's that sense of community which I think is really, really crucial. So we just launched relatively recently. We're focused on the UK and Ireland at the moment, but the intention is to launch in Australia, which is where I'm from, as soon as we can. In terms of content, we're a little bit unusual because we do a lot of our own work. My background was in law, so we take content from all levels of the chain, and we're very open to working with filmmakers to drive the discovery of their film and try and give their film a voice. I mean, for me personally, I got into this business because I got really frustrated that I couldn't find certain films, and I didn't understand why. So that's what we're trying to do, and I think that's about it.
Okay. Well, just to clarify, when you're talking about the curation, are you a lot of online platforms just have a store in a way by big genres like documentary. Would you, in your case, do not the heading documentary, but Occupy Wall Street or Green? Like, what do you mean by curation? It's a bit of a buzzword.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. So what we do is we do it more around themes. So could be a specific festival, could be as you say, Occupy Wall Street. Could be a specific event that's taking place. What we do is when we take content, we actually do a lot of work around the back end, the metadata that goes in to support those films. So when we get films from our partners, we work with them to get metadata that will help that film set to a certain community and a certain theme. What we're trying to do now, and we're really rolling out, is communicating with our members in relation to themes or issues that they care about. And it actually links back with crowdfunding as well, because obviously a lot of films are now becoming crowdfunding based, and often that funding is built around themes. So just the other day I was talking to a New York-based Palestinian filmmaker, and he's making a film about skateboarding. Which is really in Palestine. So for us, the themes is absolutely crucial, and it's built around data, and that's the core technology.
Yes, we'll go into that more. I think also the idea of bundles and putting groups together, not by the format of short or feature or doc, but rather by the topic. It is a crowded space, the UK. It's a difficult market to penetrate now. Everyone on the panel, other than our Colombian colleague, has an operation there, plus B-Sky-B and the telecoms and cable. But you're quite right that maybe not all of them are approaching it in the way you are, and in any case, filmmakers can have their films on all.
Yeah,
so
exactly. I mean, when I'm approached by filmmakers, the first thing I say to them is, firstly, do you have a sales agent or a distributor, because you should try and get a cinema release. But secondly, look, I think your advice is absolutely spot on. Get your content onto as many platforms as possible, because it gets seen by as many people as possible then, unless the VOD platform gives you a deal or gives you an incentive that makes sense. So, yeah.
Maybe we can turn to Wacky. Am I pronouncing it right, Sebastian?
Hello everyone. Thanks, Wendy. Clearly, I wouldn't give you any advices in terms of pronunciation of a Spanish word with my French accent in English, so it's going to be difficult. I'm just starting in Wacky a few weeks ago, and previously I used to be working for Apple, driving the movie business for them and the independent business for them for the last few years. I'm here to represent Wacky, so I'll be answering your question on Apple, but it's more for Wacky that I'm here for. So Wacky is not that a young company, finally, because it's 4 years that Wacky is existing. It's a Spanish-based company that has now roughly 150 people, based mainly in Barcelona. The aim of Wacky is to become one of the main players in Europe, and they are now backed by a massive group called Rakuten.
It's Japan, right?
A Japanese group that is supporting heavily the international rollout of the platform. Wacky is an SVOD platform in Spain, but also transactional now in the UK, Germany, France, and we just launched Italy a few weeks ago. The main differentiator of Wacky is that we want to be the main player in the living room, and we are working very closely with the people like manufacturers like Samsung or people like that, because we strongly believe that HD quality, 4K quality, good content, new release content, and as early as possible content is a main differentiator in that case. I'm amazed to see how much the content can make the difference, and I must say that I'm very much here in that company to drive the content side of things, because I believe that there is a way to get with the marketing and obviously the technical quality of delivery, but also the type of content to make a big difference from one platform to another. I know that there is also the EST versus VOD discussion. That is a very important point, and I think we could probably clarify a few of these. But editorially, you don't work the same way, the two products. VOD is very much toward new releases, blockbusters, and very concentrated in the top 10 titles, usually. When EST, you have a wide range of potential successes. And I wouldn't name specific titles name, because I know the figures. I can tell you that documentaries, for instance, is probably the #1 independent genre for international and for digital distribution.
I would never have guessed that. Is that for that region?
It's for the world.
For
actually.
those, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shift this year, certainly.
Yeah.
In the past, it was difficult, except for AdVOD, but that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
So-
sorry.
No, it's...
Maybe it would be good on genres to clarify with Wacky my perception of them, but again, I'm geo-blocked living in Holland, for the moment anyway. My perception is that it's more mainstream, MPAA majors, big brands, and all the high, kind of an Amazon, iTunes feel, plus local. But can you correct my impression? Does it?
No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Most of the VOD platforms are competing on the same basis. But this being said, the reality is that you can make a difference with the specific content that are independent content. And we are specifically looking right now at a more European-based type of strategy where the content will be probably less mainstream and less MPA.
Okay.
This being said, it really depends on the quality of the product we get, and I have no doubt that in Europe, especially these days, we have as many creators that we need for that. So.
Right. And what about the appetite for foreign language? Stuff from Holland, stuff from Poland, regions that you're not in, but where there is in the region it's a blockbuster, but it's not necessarily well known in the regions that you're operating. Do you see an appetite there in the Wacky context, or less so?
No, I think it's more a question of story. If you have a nice story, it can work. I mean, if you look international sales for foreign movies these days, Intouchable is probably one of the best examples of an international success. It can be seen in some cases as art house. In France, it was a blockbuster, obviously.
Sure.
Comedy is a very difficult genre in general, so I would park that because I think there's no way we can make a general rule about comedies.
Comedy doesn't travel. I think we'd
Doesn't
all
travel.
accept that as it doesn't always travel. As filmmakers, we'd know that. Even what's funny in Sweden is not necessarily what's funny in Denmark, let alone to other regions. But we will come back. I just wanted to clarify that it was TVOD and download to own in Wacky, and then SVOD in Spain.
Exactly.
And that more regions might be on the way, and maybe more business models.
Yeah, the idea is that we want to be in 12 countries before the end of the year, and ultimately to cover Europe in the next year.
Yeah.
But we are facing those challenges that you mentioned about the languages and the cost ingestion. I mean, the technical cost is something that is crucial in those developments.
Mm-hmm. I think I'll ask all the panelists this, but we'll come back. I want to talk about the specs of what you take, the costs and the deal terms. I'm sure everyone wants to know. But first, I think we should speak now with Online Colombia.
Thanks,
and I'm
Wendy.
afraid to pronounce your name Giuliano Cavalli?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Italian name with a Colombian.
Perfect.
Hello to everyone, and I'm I'm one of the co-founders of OnlineColombia.tv. What we found is that everything gets so globalized that they want everyone to use the same interface all over the world, and we start to think that maybe centralize the video content and the materials in just regions. It was interesting because also it was a lot of material, Colombian material, that it was getting lost in platforms like YouTube, Vimeo, and other platforms that there were no index that were easy to find it, and for the Colombians to find their own material. So what we are doing right now, more than buying content from other places, we're focusing in Colombia. And what we really want to do with our platform is just not to be a platform that works just in online matters. We want also to work in offline strategies. So, for example, we grow up our community and we start to do theatrical on demand with the community that we have in the platform online. So we have titles that maybe they are not Colombian, but we represent as distributors, and we show those in theatrical shows with people that are interested to find out that they come from our online community. Also, for the independent producers in Colombia, we became a social network. So kind of like the producers in Colombia can use our platform to start to work each other from different cities, sorry, and give more value to their productions with less money spent. That's one of the main keys. We support today the platform with the brands. Like we use the platform to use like content, branded content campaigns for brands, and that's the way that we support like all the infrastructure that we have behind. Apart that it got very popular, some videos and some producers. So we are one of the places that in Colombia that you can find the actual names of the people that they producing the content. That it was another thing that we found that it was missing in all the change in our region in Latin America. Like we got very interesting content, but the audience, they don't know who is making that, who is that person, and what else has done that person. Apart from that, we found that through the platform, we classified the material that we have through subjects that they were no focus in the commercial TV or in the actually what people can focus. Like, by for example, we have like big Afro communities, like around the 20% is Afro community. There were no space in the commercials TV where you can find content about Afro community. So we place in our platform something like that. Yeah.
So you were complementing what's available on normal television.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I understand that it's a free service from the point of view that you're not buying content from people in the audience for Colombia, but there is an opportunity from people in the audience, for example, around the theme of theatrical release.
Yeah.
So something that is popular online, you were explaining yesterday an example where a topic might spark interest and you get the Colombians interested in the Italian film because of its theme. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's something to connect. We know already, like, because we know our community, we know how we have our community, because we have all the metrics. We know where they see the stuff, how they see the stuff, what they like, and also the behalf that they have in each of the cities of Colombia. So we use that information also to give that input and to put the films in the right place, in the right moment, and maybe connected with something that is related with them, maybe like a local news information. And we have one of the films that is related with that, so we can use that in our community to push up that film, to make that interest of the personal city to go to see that movie. So it's just
event screenings in a way, like We Want Cinema or Gather or
something like that model of the stuff. And I think it's very interesting because we take just using our community, not just to be in the living room watching the movies, taking out from the house and going to see movies somewhere else. So it's kind of like a mix in that we're still exploring, because we, in Colombia, VOD, and in the whole Latin American region, VOD is getting very popular for the past 2 years, because now we have also the infrastructure, the internet is get faster. 4G, it was last year launched in Colombia. So now they have all these mobile devices that people is interested to watch stuff in their mobile devices. So it's kind of like the right moment in the Latin America region to start to explore this. And we believe that it's more important, not to try to globalize the whole region, so to try to focus in each of the region and try to make a platform that it works for them, and it's easy to use it.
Who would you say are the three biggest VOD type regions or countries in Latin America?
But I think in VOD right now is Mexico, Chile, and Brazil. Like
Right.
Argentina was bigger, but now like Colombia took place on that. Colombia is growing faster in the VOD. Like last year, we got like a record selling. Well, it was the World Cup, and football is a matter very important in Colombia. But we got the record on selling smart TVs in Colombia right now. So like technology is in the house, in the homes of the people. Internet is getting faster. So like smart TVs and apps in smart TVs are getting very popular. Like 2 years ago, you never see someone going to a shop to buy a TV and ask if it has Netflix inside. Now it's something that people goes and they don't ask for the brand of the TV. They ask if it's Netflix inside there. So something that is changing the whole habit, and it's so quick in the region. It's money in the region investing in those things. So I think it's the right moment.
And can you tell us a few names of other platforms other than Netflix that are in those regions?
But for example, Qubit has they come from Argentina, and they are buying territories from like pretty much all the Latin America right now. They're in Panama, in Uruguay, in Chile, in Argentina. I think they're in Brazil as well.
They're beginning to buy international content.
They're
as well.
interesting, yeah.
Qubit.
Qubit. Yeah, Quibit.
Yeah. And what about in Mexico? I thought there was Cineopolis Click, but that seems to be...
But they get from what I understand for their model, they get the rights from what the theatrical they have, and they use it for
VOD.
For the VOD. It's the interesting thing about Latin America at the moment is that there are so many models coming up.
Yes.
And the independent models, they also have the same values and the same opportunities that the big names. So I think that's what is very interesting, what's going on over there.
And for language neutral Spanish, I think
Yeah,
can
there was
translate.
neutral Spanish, yeah.
I've heard that phrase and
But I think that all that Latin American Spanish, it works for all the countries. We just have weird when it's Spanish coming from Spain.
Yeah.
But
It's very
sounds
funny.
Yeah, it's true. But if it comes from from Mexico to Colombia, and it works very well because we have all this telenovela culture that it goes everywhere, and then they're the same. So
Didn't you say that you had some surprising traction in other regions that are not Colombia?
yeah, that's funny. Was
Let's guess.
since we launched the platform, like we have our two biggest clicks are obviously in Colombia. One is in Bogota, and second one is in Barranquilla, in our region, and third one is Miami, because there is a big Colombian community in Miami, but it's bigger than any other city in Colombia. It's like of those three tops is a. But also we have funny clicks in the platform. I know, like we have a click in China, like every 2 days. I don't know if they're trying to see what we do, or if there is a Colombian immigrant that lives in China. So it's kind of that's very interesting also when you start to see how is the behavior of the back end of the platform.
Yeah.
Very interesting. You start you don't know the person, but you start to learn how they use the platform. It's very passionate.
It's great. Well, I'm going to keep going through questions and drilling down into deals and stuff, but before I do, is there anyone that has a question already that you want to ask from the floor? Otherwise, we will keep going. I'm sure you're interested in perhaps deal terms, or is that boring? Okay. So I think we should assume that transactional VOD for all of you, just to save time, is a revenue share. There's no MG, there's no, okay, so that gets that out of the way. And your license period for a current as opposed to a library title, would currents be 2 to 4 months or longer? You can each speak, and library, yeah.
I mean, we tend to take 2 years.
For a current?
Yeah, for current, and also for catalog, we just have a blanket 2 year period.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's
Okay.
and that but most of our content at the moment is from distributors, so it's
Yeah, I understand.
It's a blanket agreement that covers everything. But
And
we're open to if the distributors only want it for a shorter period of time
Sure.
in particular titles, then yeah, we do that. But we view our distributors as partners.
Yeah.
So we really
you'll work it out with them.
We'll work it out with them. The contract may say 2 years, but if they say,
Uh-huh.
actually, can we take it down after 6 months
Yeah,
because we
sure.
want to
Okay.
give it something else, we will.
And obviously for an umbrella organization, you can't answer simply, but I'm guessing that it's a shorter
Well,
period.
there are some principles that
Yes,
are common
go
to
ahead.
all of the platforms.
Yeah.
TVOD and SVOD, most of the time we offer revenue sharing.
Yeah.
50-50
Mhm.
or 60 to rights holders, 40, depending on the title, depending on what we have to invest in terms of material, digitization, encoding, subtitling, etc. We keep the films as long as possible.
Right.
Deal
Several
terms,
years.
2
Yeah.
years, 5 years, non-exclusive, in some cases exclusive when we invest or when we put some MGs, but these are renewable agreements, so we keep the titles as long as possible. MGs are rare for the moment because our companies are small, but when we are convinced that a title has to be present in our catalogs, because it will shine among the other jewels that we have, we are ready to put an MG. We have started with some quite symbolic amounts like 3,000, 5,000 euros, going up to 30, 40,000. And I'll give you 2 examples of more significant amounts. A couple of years ago, Ciné, the French platform, which is the oldest one, the most advanced, and which already has enough resources to invest in minimum guarantees, bought Cosmopolis
Yes.
just before the presentation of the film in Cannes for 150,000 euros. Exclusive mandate for video on demand exploitation in France for 10 years. The film was not the success that my colleagues from the acquisition team expected, but within a year they recouped 100,000 euros. And we still have the film for 9 other years. And when I say exclusive mandate, that means that we can exploit the film on all video on demand channels in France, our web-based platform, the branded channels Ciné on IPTV services. We can aggregate films, and this one in particular, and supply services like Orange and also Apple, because we are aggregators for global
Right.
platforms as well. So we can put the film on all
So it wouldn't
channels.
appear on an SVOD like Netflix in France because it's been carved out with the exclusivity.
Yes, but
That's
if it appears on Netflix, it comes from us.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's,
And
sorry.
another example, which is also interesting, especially for producers, Ciné bought, entered actually in the financing plan of Under the Rainbow, the French comedy, a few years ago for 200,000 euros. It was done on screenplay and cast, and they have the film for 13 years, exclusive mandate, same conditions.
And for SVOD in Wacky in Spain, if I may, Sebastian, is that also a rev share or a flat fee when you're acquiring a library title for second run subscription VOD?
So subscription is really very close to pay TV in terms of
Yeah.
business model. So you would find
Flat fee.
a range of different cases depending on the film and everything. I think the other element when you were saying about VOD as a rental is I would say a short-term investment, 1 year, 2 years, it's okay. When you're speaking about EST,
Yeah, that's different.
DTO, it's a different thing because someone that is buying a film needs to own it in perpetuity. So even if the rights to the platform is usually temporary, there is a permanent right given to the cloud, to the consumer that buys it. And speaking about Wacky and the opportunity to pay minimum guarantee, I think with the way the windows are moving around these days, there are opportunities to get monies upfront if the project worth it in order to be synchronized with the theatrical release or even without any theatrical release, which is the case with many partners we are working with in France, for instance. the e-cinema concept that Wild Bunch and TF1, and probably other local partners are supporting are opportunities for right owners to get direct money. Actually, if it's becoming more exclusive in some cases. In those ones, for now, it's non-exclusive, but it could become. So we could be paying as Wacky some money upfront for acquisition of first Windows titles.
But the money up front thing can also be a bit overrated. Sometimes what matters is just knowing that you have money by the end of the window. And in SVOD models where people are asking only for a rev share, at least the platforms that I'm aware of will explain possible ranges. You know, that by the end of 3 years, you should get at least the greater of this rev share, or $500 or something, you know, just something to quantify it based on experience. Yeah.
I think when we are speaking about money up front, there is one part that we never cover. It's the marketing investment.
Correct.
And everyone is thinking about the money that they can get immediately, but the real value in that world is how you can shout out about your movie and how you can make people to know it so that you can resell it to
all the windows,
derivated windows after that. And very often the platforms, and I'm speaking from my experience of the last few years, are more inclined into investing in communication broadly than to put money on the table for upfront investment for production. And also there is one good reason for that, is that we are totally, as platform people, we are so far from production that we have a doubt editorially on where to put the money in. So we feel more comfortable to have people coming to us saying, okay, we have a great project, we believe in our project, would you mind supporting it? Say, okay, well, we can be big time. For instance, Wacky has a deal with most of the manufacturers, and we can secure placement across multiple countries for a movie in the living room. So if you go to theatrical, the theatrical window could have a trailer directly on the TV, just because we make an agreement with the producer.
Sure.
So.
And just to clarify again, distinctions between the platforms, will Wacky only license stuff that already exists, or pre-buy, I think, or invest? I think you've answered license.
It's a delicate question. There's no equity investment. But it could be pre-buy.
Pre-buy is still possible, which is more pragmatic, I think. And Dragoslav, you were saying there were some cases of that as well, pre-license, pre-buy, as you've explained.
It's quite rare.
It's
actually.
rare.
It's on some specific titles. But this is also because the platforms belong to producers and distributors.
Yes.
And it has been extremely important for these groups of rights holders to structure video on demand as a new segment of the value chain which complements the rest. With the DVD market shrinking, they wanted absolutely that legal video on demand offers function in that way. And this is also like a political statement when they do finance films before production.
And when, I guess, Sebastian, when you were at Apple, of course, there was the expensive iTunes spec that people needed to deliver and recoup for maybe it would be 800 euros or whatever the figure is. Sometimes, however, the other platforms, and maybe Wacky, you can tell us, will accept a DVD or a ProRes, or can each of you give us some explanation on what you require?
Speaking about Wacky, I think the level of requirement is probably lower. This being said, we tend to be more and more taking the materials that have been prepared for the other platforms. So it's more a shift toward the standardization of quality, because as you can say, I mean, the quality of iTunes delivery, it's expensive because the value is there, and the money is not going to the platform; it's going to the laboratory. So, for instance, Wacky is taking deliveries of the ProRes from iTunes.
Correct. Where it's already been licensed on iTunes, you can then amortize it to all these other platforms. But sometimes if you're doing a TVOD deal and you have a more obscure film, you may skip iTunes and license all the other TVODs just to save the cost that you have to recoup. So these are the sorts of considerations. What about, will you take ProRes then?
At the moment, yes, we
Yes.
work with ProRes files or specific mezzanine files, because what's important to know is that each platform, be it on the web or an IPTV channel, has its own technical specifications. So in some cases, when we receive a digital file for a film, we have to encode it in up to 20 different formats. It's a huge work, and then we have to store them somewhere, because Orange has its own specificities, SFR, same, etc., etc. A few years ago, when we were still young companies, we used to take also DVDs, which at that time gave a quality which was acceptable. It's not anymore the case, because we are transferring all of our content to HD. So now we work only with professional files. However, we have problems with catalog films, because they do not have Apple ProRes files for many of them. So we need to work with DigiBeta or Beta SP, go to a lab, digitize, etc., etc. So there are various case scenarios here.
By the way, in the audience, I'm curious if any one of you have licensed your programming to these platforms. You can put your hand up if any of you have, just out of curiosity. And maybe put your hand up if any one of you have licensed anything to TVOD in any way. So we have quite a bit of TVOD, say, licensing. And put your hand up if you've licensed to more than one TVOD player. Good, okay. What about SVOD? Hands up if you've been doing SVOD for exclusive pay TV type SVOD. Hands. Okay, and less. And then the non-exclusive, the Netflix, right. So there's a fair number who are not exploiting. And is the reason, I'd be very interested, who has the mic right now? Someone holding a mic? Can anyone, if you feel comfortable, tell us your reason? Is it a rights issue with sales agents or distributors that take the rights and don't use them, or is it no time? I'd be curious for your reasons for not licensing aggressively to many platforms in, say, subscription VOD. There's one person in the front here. Sorry, I just want everyone to hear you.
We ourselves have a VOD platform for many years, and we have more than 1,200 sites, our sites.
What's the name of the platform?
It's called Online Movies Box.
Right, okay.
And we tried many times to license to other companies, but and some of them, we have some great films. We even have studio films.
Right, yeah.
But we were totally unsuccessful in doing that. That's why we have 1,000 websites of our own.
Was it more than a year ago?
At all times.
Okay. I was just curious because the shifts have been very dramatic, right, in the past year, even late 2014, 2015, partly because the bigger players like a Netflix rolling into new regions causes a kind of a ripple effect in all of those regions. When they first went into Germany, then local counterparts sprung up, and you could license either to the local counterpart or to the Netflix or both, or the pay TV.
We actually try not to license to Netflix. And
this I understand.
to
yeah.
Voodoo and all that, which we used to be on them.
Yeah,
Because
interesting.
actually it's better to have stuff on your site and be sort of exclusive or have unique site than license to them. And we also found out that we now have studio films, and that makes a very big difference. Because when somebody
That's a bit
goes,
of what Sebastian was saying.
real studio, like Lord of the Rings and Inception, all that. Because we found out that when you have that, when people look at
Then
your
they
site,
come.
they're
Yeah.
very interested. If not, they just say, forget it, you know. that kind of
Well,
thing.
unless they're art house fans or festival fans, which is some of what you're going after, a different audience, the festival audience. Anyone else in the room to share an experience on frustration or success with a licensing in SVOD or TVOD? Yes?
So I'm working for a distribution company in Colombia,
Ah,
And the issue we have with SVOD that, for example, Netflix, they will buy movies with like all Latin American rights. It means that if you don't have
all the other countries.
all the countries, they're not going to buy it.
That's a new change as well in the past 6 months. It wasn't the case before, but that's very interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, trying, but
Okay. No, but there's obviously others around the corner.
Yes.
One of the other takeaways is the platforms that are there now. There are still more rolling into different regions. They're either expanding where they are now, but it's not announced, or new platforms spring up in defense against the other ones. So I think it just has a curve of its own. We'll come back and forth with the panel. Oh, yes, can I help you?
Well, I was just curious, like when you're saying you're only in various regions at this point, which doesn't mean you're not interested in content from all over the world, because you are interested in content, perhaps not the Colombia content, but you're interested in content from all over, but just not able to broadcast.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a good clarification. Thanks for that. Certainly, when we've been working in VOD, most sites take and buy programming from everywhere, but they're just clearing the rights for the region that they're in or about to be in.
Right.
So we, for example, were buying for Australian films for use in Europe, even though they couldn't license VOD in their own region. And the same things happened in Canada. I'm originally Canadian. There are a lot of blocks from broadcasters and catch-up rights and sort of tie-ups in funding in the local region, but it's completely open for the rest of the world. And you'll see now a lot of platforms in America, for example, or the UK, are beginning OTT services internationally, like Turner, Stars. They're starting SVOD in Europe, and acquiring rights now that way. Let's go back, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you've raised a really good point. It's kind of interesting from a legal and regulatory point of view, which is my background. In a lot of jurisdictions, in a lot of territories, the law is very grey, or tends to be grey, around purely VOD distribution. So if your film hasn't been in a cinema, if it hasn't been on DVD, if it hasn't been had any distribution, then unfortunately in a lot of territories the law is just grey, you know, in relation to the certification, in relation to the regulatory things that you have to go through to show that film online. And what's happening is the law, that's being clarified, and as that's clarified, it's making VOD more attractive. And I think that's an interesting development that's taking place. So in the UK, the BBFC, the British Board of Film Classification, has been very forward-thinking in terms of how they certify content and how they embrace purely VOD distribution. Unfortunately, Australia is not quite as developed on that sense. And I also think that, you know, building onto this, as you know, as deep VOD overtakes Blu-ray and DVD by 2018, you know, this is an area where it's just going to continue to expand with improvements in technology and the regulatory regime becoming a lot more clearer as people become more familiar with this form of viewing content.
You had a remark, yes. Sebastian.
In my past, I've been supporting international releases of very small titles, and I had the opportunity to release one movie that was called The Rocket, which is an Australian production. Yeah, beautiful movie, tiny budget. I loved it, and I wanted to release it internationally. Unfortunately, the law is something, but the business is structured in a way where independent producers, you need to have the money up front in order to make your film. So you pre-sell the film. And very often, you're too much advanced in your discussions to be able to hold back any rights and really control that. So my advice was in that case, and I was early enough to be able to discuss that with the international sales agent, was to say, okay, do your deals internationally, take the money wherever you can, but make sure that you control the release date for digital. So I wouldn't say, okay, let's turn the table down and change the world of what you used to do, because the money in digital is it's still tiny compared to what you can get elsewhere. But be smart and keep the control on your property, on your intellectual property, and make sure that the work will be done. Because the history of cinema is all about stories of people pre-selling the films, and you don't hear any more about your movie.
It's over.
It's
Yeah.
over. It's over.
Yeah.
So digital is one way for you to keep control.
And I think that Dragoslav, were working on Streams Day and Date and similar initiatives. Can you tell the people here about that for Europe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Streams Day and Date is part of the experimental projects that are run by the European Commission within the preparatory action circulation of European films in the digital era. A few years ago in the United States, Magnolia started by releasing films on a day and date, meaning simultaneously in theaters and on video on demand. And they had some very interesting results. Then Curzon Artificial Eye in the UK was one of the pioneers in Europe to start doing the same. And in both cases, we speak about players that are at the same time distributors and exhibitors.
Cinema exhibitors, yeah.
Which is the crucial point. So Curzon as well started to give some very interesting data on the exploitation of the films and the fact that you can maximize the impact of your marketing and promotional campaign because you release the film at the same time on 2 different screens or channels. So people who want to see the film in theaters go there. People who cannot go to the theatrical release can see the film at home. Exhibitors were really cross with that because they saw this as a threat. But the European Commission was interested to know what's behind the results. Are there films that could take advantage of this type of exploitation and release, and films for which it's more interesting to follow the traditional way? So this is why there were these experimental projects. And ours, Streams Day and Date, works with 3 different films, 1 comedy, 1 drama, 1 documentary, that we released in up to 4 different countries, simultaneously or quasi-simultaneously, because it's a very delicate subject, not only in France, but also in other European countries. So we decided to work closely with exhibitors and follow what they ask, meaning that in some cases, we preserved the exclusivity of their window for a week or 2 weeks, and then we released on VOD. It's also possible to do ultra VOD, meaning that you release first on video on demand with a preferential price, more
Home
expensive,
cinema, yeah.
and then you go to theatrical. Clearly, from our experiment, there are some small films, independent films, that could take advantage of this type of exploitation and release, but it has to be linked to a very specific, tailor-made, event-driven release on all channels,
it's not a cookie
plus
cutter.
a very strong campaign on social media so that you activate all the followers of a director or actor, etc.
Sebastian, and then there's 2 questions from the audience I want to capture. But
so I think the question of early release is the issue we have in Europe is that it's very, very tiny steps. So the films that are picked so far are not going to change the game. If you look at the United States, for instance, Snowpiercer, that has been released.
Massive.
It was 5 or 7 million in 3 weeks, only digital, and then in theatrical.
Sure.
And I am French, so I am probably part of the country that is protecting the most theatrical window. But when you see the life cycle of a movie in theaters right now, you should ask yourself, does that deserve such a release, or can you go direct and do something bigger? And I can say that theatrical companies exhibitors will be in the future supporting this as well, because they will have an interest to be part of that world. So
Certainly, if they're cut in on part of the deal, but that's another conversation. Let's quickly pick the two people. Can we
Pick the
start?
guy with the microphone first. Hi, I work for a trade association for sales agents. You've just been talking about the results of VOD releases and comparing them with the situation with cinemas. For 100 years, we've known what the box office results are. We don't, unless there's some experiment, unless there's some public money that releases that data, we have no idea of what any movies do anywhere in the world in the online space. And if online is going to have more of an impact on decisions of people investing in productions, surely this has to change. And surely the public need charts as well. They like charts.
I think you've raised a really good point, because unfortunately the industry is shrouded, to a certain extent, is shrouded in secrecy unless a film like Snowpiercer or Margin Call, where the numbers were pretty exceptional, unless the distributor and the VOD platform in question choose to release those figures, they tend to be kept quite secret. I think you're absolutely right. I think the industry should be a bit more forthcoming with such figures, but unfortunately, there's so many players in different areas, and everyone is going to be very closely defending their own their own turf. We personally would not have an issue releasing figures. In actual fact, we're working very closely with our partners to try and do so. But I think I get your frustration, but I think it's going to be very difficult to get that change, but maybe that will come. Maybe that will come from ongoing discussions.
There's already a fair amount of data, even based on the States, the Transparency Project, for example, and I think also it's a bit of a chicken egg to actually do the stuff and see the results. We'll give you the results.
I mean, the US,
but it has
US
to be very film specific. Yeah. Let's go, and then I haven't forgotten you.
Just on that, because it's indeed a very important question, and we always receive it from rights holders. It's not yet a consolidated market. Video on demand platforms are still young in a way. When platforms receive public funding, their obligations that they send data in reportings to national or EU institutions, and this is the case of our platforms. However, we cannot have figures on the exploitation of some of our films on telecom companies' channels or on global players, because global players do not follow the same rules and regulations. So there is a discrepancy.
It's confidentiality.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me pick up some of the questions from the audience, if I may. There was a woman here.
Good morning.
Who am I? Can you put your hand up?
Yeah.
There you are. Okay. Yeah.
So I have, my name is Victor. I'm a producer from Brazil. We have a few films on VOD that we sold through different platforms such as iTunes, Netflix, and we also sell it on our own website through Vimeo On Demand or Distrify. And we think it's a huge market for Brazil because there are over 100 films being made every year, only 3,000 screens, and most of them are occupied by blockbusters. Most cities don't have cinemas, but everywhere has internet.
Yep.
One huge issue that we face, though, is the payment friction. Is the friction of the payment system. We see big numbers on cable VOD or in other platforms that use a phone payment system, but most people don't have credit cards or they're afraid of putting their credit cards on the internet. And I'm sure it's true for a lot of other Latin American countries too. I mean, in Argentina, nobody will take credit cards when you're over there. So most platforms are based in North America and Europe, and they don't get that. So I'm always, when I have the chance to meet people from platforms, saying that we have to rethink the way payments are made for third world countries. Google and Facebook, they know that. When you buy an ad on Facebook in Brazil, you can print an invoice and go to the bank and pay it. And Google also does that, but not the VOD platforms.
It's correct.
I got something for that. When we're doing that, basically we're dealing with that, and we found one of those problems in Colombia, and the 2.0 version of our platform, the VOD is coming up, and what we want to do is people, where they go to buy the lottery, they can get a code and put it in our platform.
Yeah.
Because it's something that is, we have, in every corner you have a place to buy the lottery, and it's all connected with the banks and everything, and people goes there, so it's something that is into the habits of the people in there, so it's just use that and put it into the platform. So this is those kind of strategies that we want to have in online Colombia.
Yes? Yeah. I've heard of the prepaid mobile phone cards where you can get data pre-bought for video in Brazil. That's an experiment that I was aware of, although it's not rolled out commercially. And weren't you explaining also about the new free data or fixed data? Maybe you could explain about that, and then we'll come back to you. Yeah.
So basically, Colombia got this year is one of the countries that is in the internet.org. So Zuckerberg and Facebook went to Colombia, and we got involved in this massive project that one of the telcos that is in Colombia is providing some websites on free internet. So basically, without having any data in your cell phone, you can access those websites. That's one of the actions that we are doing also with the internet-friendly content that we have in the platform. So everything that is no big length, at 3 minutes to 20 minutes, like internet-friendly content, we want to put it inside that. So also our community grows, not just with the people that it has access to the internet, so with more people that maybe they don't have access to the internet or to pay the internet, but they build also the community, and we can communicate with them or the other actions that we want to do offline.
Yes, sir.
We offer a card that you can buy at the store.
Right, a card, a retail card.
Yes, so for viewers, you have to activate at the store.
Mm-hmm.
And for other countries,
Where is the mic? And then we'll come back to you because you obviously had a question. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
I mentioned that we have two types of cards. One is similar to the Now TV card, which you activate at the store in England or United States. And in Hong Kong, you can have it activated at every 7-Eleven. Or we just have scratch cards, and we put them in products and things like that.
So those are some options. Can we give the mic back to the gentleman in the back who is patiently grinning? And I wanted to come back to you on the reporting of VOD data in a moment. Get some more. Yes?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Sailesh. I'm a producer and distributor from India.
Yes.
And there's a way, first of all, yes, I'm a complete believer in digital and VOD. I come from a country which makes the largest number of films in the world with the lowest number of theaters on a per capita basis. And if you have a small film, getting distribution in theaters is almost next to impossible. So we co-produced an independent film last year, which was very nice. It went to a lot of festivals. And after getting a token theatrical distribution, because you need legitimacy as far as the critics are concerned, we put it on digital and VOD. But we did something very interesting. First of all, I don't know whether we are a unique case or not, but we would make more money out of digital and VOD than out of theatrical over its run. Number two, we actually got a brand involved which offered an incentive for people who wanted to stream the movie, so that if you stream the movie for, say, $1 or an equivalent of $1 in the different currency, the brand would give you something back worth about $2. Now that makes it almost risk-free for people to download the film, and rather than going to torrents, I'd much rather feel nice for once and actually download the movie. And we have had twice the number of people paying for the movie and coming to the platform.
Okay.
And I think that I'm waiting for the day when a big billboard outside somewhere would say, coming to a VOD site near you. Because I think theatrical for certain types of films is absolutely almost dead. I don't think that it's really worth the expense. So just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Okay, another comment, another hand has gone up. Just while the mic is moving, the idea that revenues being reported for VOD is one filter, but the other filter is cost saved. So for example, we were talking before about Lionsgate, who saved $25 million on P&A when they brought out Hunger Games. because they brought out social games and a different campaign that cost a fraction of the price. The returns in the box office aren't the only measure of whether something is working economically. So if you're bringing your cost down, I think your day and date experiences have also shown that that's part of profitability and return. How much are we spending on ads in subways or bus stations versus engaging with audience? I was going to ask a question about the concept of a premiere. This has come up for probably all of you. When you are agreeing to buy a film from China or from Canada or from Poland, for example, and you're not currently in that region, it's a premiere. You could argue it's a promotable premiere. So that's the plus. But is there also a downside, meaning no one's ever heard of it? I mean, how do you balance how do you value a premiere when you're making these decisions? Maybe you have some comments on that. Yeah. We can start with Dragoslav. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty much related to the traditional way of exploiting films and theatrical. I, at the same time, agree and disagree with the gentleman from India. For some films, it doesn't necessarily make sense to go to theatrical, yeah. But what we observe on video on demand is that films that have performed well in theaters have bigger chances of also performing well on DVD and VOD. Mm-hmm. There are, of course, exceptions. Some films are made to be seen mostly on video, direct to video. If it's a film that is totally unknown, the director is unknown, the actors as well, it's much more difficult to promote it. So we use every possibility, not only social media, but also how to link this film to the other films that we already have in order to highlight something. It's a theme or an actor or the subject or the country. It's the curation, the buzzword that you pronounced at the beginning of our conversation. Curation is a key aspect in the way films are proposed and promoted on video on demand. Mm. But again, from our experience for independent art house films, festival premieres and theatrical exposure are crucial for the life of the film afterwards.
Although that's just a way, it's hitting promotion. That's that way of promotion.
Yeah.
If you can promote.
Otherwise, you have to find
crowd.
different, innovative ways of linking with the right audience for this film. It's interesting as a word, but it's a huge task.
How about you, Sebastian?
That's more a personal view and my experience that would say about it. I think the question is more the promotion in general. The platforms, whatever it is, if you create the event, you create the event. When people are saying theatrical is bringing the audience, is it theatrical or is it the money you spend to do the promotion in theatrical? That's the calculation that you can make as well.
Yes.
I believe you need to be close to the people, the way they are going to consume your content. So, for instance, Wacky has a deal with EE in the UK, and we just finalized an agreement with O2 in Germany.
Is this the Blockbuster Wednesdays?
Yeah, exactly, where we are offering content to the mobile consumers. It's a difficult take because you could argue that a film is not made for small screens like phones. You always need to think about your movie for an audience, and it's all related to the content you have and the marketing you do around it. So there is not one single rule, and the rule can be different for the same film in the different countries. For instance, in France, smart TVs are not a big deal. It's set-top boxes that are bringing most of the content for the living room. When in Italy, smart TVs is a big thing. So you can think that that could have an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I just, I mean, I think the fact is that if you're an independent filmmaker or you've got a relatively small amount. You've got a small amount of money that you can pour into marketing. Full stop. So if you pour a lot of your money into the cinema release, if you're lucky, you'll get a wide release, but you maybe won't, depending on which territory you release in. If 3 or 6 months down the line, you're pouring another lot of money into the marketing, you're essentially spending twice as much to get to the same people in 2 different times. Yeah. So I think this is, for me at least, this is the key to day-and-date release. The idea that essentially you only spend that marketing part once, so your costs, your P&A is a lot lower, and essentially you maximize the return on that initial spend. The issue is going to be that obviously a lot of the theaters would see it as a threat to their business. So I think the reason this works so well in the States is because of the vertical integration. But I think Sebastian's absolutely spot on. It's about the marketing, it's about the P&A, and it's about using what little money you have effectively to reach the right people in the right community.
I'm wondering also about genres, because some stories or types of genre don't even necessarily need marketing.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a dedicated horror fan, you will know, where to find your horror, and you'll look for it, whether it's marketed to you or not. And traditional outlets may not offer horror on broadcast TV or in the cinemas. So we have people in the room who focus on sci-fi, fantasy, horror. That is a completely different approach where digital makes very good sense, because you can reach your passionate fan base. If your passionate fan base is interested in anime and manga, it's not even about spending a lot of money necessarily on marketing. It's about getting to your first point, the community.
It's important, the
So let's
community.
talk-
Like, for example,
Yeah.
for us, premieres are very interesting because we can make an event from that. For us, it makes a lot of sense. But like in the whole region of Latin America, if you think is the 20% of the subscribers of cable, satellite, and IPTV, they're accessing VOD. So that line of where you premiere, in which system you premiere, that line is blurring very much in the region of Latin America. So it really depends. And what you say is that the fact that if you play with science fiction movies, that it gets more international. Like,
yeah, what would you say the themes are? So I don't give my own opinions. The themes that travel. We said comedy didn't, but we didn't really focus on what does. So multi-region, what's your winners for picking up?
So I can tell you the top list of the genres that are working, if you are interested. So documentaries, it's not all documentaries.
No.
Okay? So you need to have, it's all about passion. The content will travel if the people are interested into it. So wildlife, I mean, animals and everything, that doesn't travel that much. But if you go to a guy that is a skateboarder and that did a murder and that is Australian, coming from the countryside and everything, that's something that is going to suddenly start to be interesting. So documentaries, really, I couldn't emphasize more that genre that is cost effective as well, because producing a documentary is not producing a sci-fi movie for sure. I would really support that part of the business. The second part, which is kind of a funny one, it's probably the romantic comedies, where clearly for digital there is an appeal to it.
Universal.
It's everywhere. You don't need to have a cast as well to be successful. You just need to have good-looking people, funny story, Paris, Rome, something in the title, and that works, that travels.
It's clickable. Yeah.
No, I tell you, it's really as basic as it is, really. And everyone is thinking, oh, romantic comedies, but it's super difficult to find the right script, the good writing for that. So it's a challenge. The cost is not that expensive to create, but I would tell you, okay, move ahead. Obviously, action titles are good, but the cost is all coming from the cast, so you need to be safe enough in order to be successful in that area. The kid stuff is not that easy, clearly, because of the dubbing questions as well. if you want to travel internationally, you will need to create those versions. Language version is, I mean, you cannot ask a kid of 5 years to read subtitles, so obviously that's an obstacle. So these are the few takes I can say at this stage, and I could spend hours discussing that because I love it.
Okay.
I would add also erotic films and animation.
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 Adult animation or kids? Yeah.
Both actually, both. But what is more interesting is the work that we can do as digital distributors when we position a title. For instance, we sold and marketed Under the Rainbow on our platform accordingly to the campaign that already existed from the theatrical release. It was a comedy, and of course it was very easy because the French duo is so known, the director and the screenwriter in France. But we positioned the film in a very different way in Spain, in Bulgaria, in the UK. It was a romantic comedy, and it focused on other aspects of the film so that the film could travel and be presented there as well. So there are some subtle ways of finding how to present the film. So it's not only about the genre, it's also about
Presentation.
the presentation and the distribution work that we need to do according to each market specificities again. And as you said, comedies do not travel in the same way as other genres. Let's
Except
say
maybe British
some-
comedy. Yeah.
Exactly. But again, there are possibilities. But it's on a film per film basis.
But within documentary, and I want to get your opinion, within documentary, is there something about pacing? At least certainly we found as buyers in VOD that on digital, when they're buying docs, it's more fast-paced, edgy, kind of a millennial, digital native type of an audience rather than the very educational, slow-paced docs. That has been our experience in Europe. I do not know if that's true from your trenches. Can I hear some views on that for the nonfiction producers in the room? Yeah.
I just can say that docs are not available in general.
Yeah.
That's one of the elements, and people love documentaries. It's just that they don't see them.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's one element of it. And the rest is that it's addressing very often communities, subjects that are very, very clearly identified for groups of people, and therefore you have that part that is bringing the social part of communication around it.
Okay.
But that's my
Yeah. William, anything to add? No.
No,
It's not been
I
an
think-
issue for you. To,
No,
Okay.
I mean, we're building up our documentary collection, so it's early days for us to be able to comment. But actually, can I just add one more point to what they mentioned, and it's a bit unusual. Culture. Actually, culture itself is something that's very interesting in terms of traveling. If you make a film that's about your home culture, that in itself can be a very interesting theme. So our biggest selling film is an Indonesian film.
Oh, really? Tell us about that.
It's called In the Absence of the Sun, and it's very. I mean, I don't think it's shown anywhere else. It's just on our platform at the moment, and the director's done a lot to promote that film. But it gives a real insight into the culture, underground culture in Jakarta. And then another big selling film is Iranian film that we have. Well, it's Lebanese Iranian called Circumstance. So these are both very cultural films. And actually they're cultural, but they also deal with, specifically in both cases, they deal with LGBT issues as well, which
Again,
in
is
itself
a
is a general theme,
niche.
but also it's a niche, but the cultural point, people want to see stuff from different cultures. So I think that's an interesting development.
Any comments from the audience or questions? Yes? Can somebody pass the mic here to the front? Thank you.
I'm just curious how the proposal in the EU to consolidate all the territories would affect, a couple of these distribution platforms that are
I could jump
cross-territory.
in from today's news that's already backing down.
Okay.
And there's but we won't speak for the official thing, but if you read the news today, there's a possible exemption for the film and TV industry. I haven't gone into the detail. Does anyone else want to comment on? the single union.
I thought, I mean, as a lawyer, I was pretty astounded by the changes that were being suggested. I mean, we on the surface, we probably should be in favour because we're thinking, oh wow, we can get across Europe really easily. But actually, it would be a bit of a nightmare, and it would really hurt a lot of our partners. You can figure through the logic. It can have quite dramatic impact on our partners. So. I think if that back down has taken place, that's probably a good thing.
Let's read more about it. You'll see it in the news, so we don't. Yeah.
There's no business like film business. So we need to know and to understand the specificities of this industry. Sure. It's an art and an industry. Territoriality and windows are crucial key principles in the financing of films. It's true that with digital we can have this impression of a global marketplace, but again we have in Europe 24 official languages. Emotion and cognition are not structured in the same way in our brains. We don't watch films in the same way. Films do not travel that easily, even if they're online. There are lots of things to be done, and each profession, each segment of the value chain has a very particular and important role to bring the film to the audience. So I would say industry-led solutions, they come. It's true that we need some time to develop them, to think first, to develop them and to propose them, but they come. So let the industry work. And if there should be a new legal framework, because technology is evolving so fast, well, we should first discuss the EU and the industry, and then decide together.
A whole other topic, indeed. I was wondering, I saw another hand. Yes.
Hi there, my name is Siobhan McCarthy. Thank you so much for a great panel. I'm curious, I know we're talking film here, but if any of you are doing anything on the digital series side.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. Web
Thanks, Wendy.
series, well done. But actually, we should hit TV series, because we forgot to mention that expressly, whether you're buying TV or not, and then web series, those two categories. Okay, let's go through. Exactly. So let's go through.
I think there's also
Let's just go through everybody.
Not just from the point of are we buying or are we taking, but also I think from the point of view of the model. I think you, if you know, for pay-per-view, films make sense, but maybe for TV series and webisodes, maybe advertising base would be better, or maybe a subscription base would be better. I think it's a blend approach to that kind of content. In our case, absolutely, we will be taking that content in due course.
So we don't take any TV, but we engage all the network of producers that we got to make web series, because it's something that engage our audience, and it's growing. Like something that's growing because you can get a web series that is made with basically like no money, and another ones that you get with a lot of like big production stuff. So and they blur in the same, and the audience, they take it in the same way. And it's something that engage audience. So every time that it's the only money that we're putting in production in any of the projects is in web series right now.
In our case, it depends on the platforms. For instance, in Spain, related to the business model of the platform, as VOD, they acquire lots of TV series, not web series, but TV series. In France, less than that, but TV series that were directed by cinema directors. Same in Belgium. In Austria, the platform has now a new shareholder, which is the national broadcaster, so they have original TV series, which is very interesting and works really well. Yeah. So, again, it depends on the country.
Wacky is doing in Spain many investments in TV shows. It's mainly like Peaky Blinders or things like that are kind of massive shows. Generally speaking, I strongly believe that the crossover is going to happen even more importantly in the next few years. When we are speaking now about films and TV shows and web series, all of that is about a story you tell to the people.
Correct.
So the timing and everything, you can see even on the TV show, we were speaking about the windowing on the film side, but clearly you have the main players in the market that are totally destructuring the way you were used to consume a TV show, where it used to be once per week you had your night in with the TV show. Now it's binge watching of a full season and everything. So I guess all of that is very promising. I think web series, you have tons of creativity in the web series that you don't find elsewhere. I would say the most creative part is probably web series these days. Then TV shows clearly is a big part of it, and films need to reinvest into creation in the future.
I think it's a different topic, so we won't spend too long on it. But indeed, certainly you're coming from Canada. There are other regions where web series have begun as a web series and ended up being commissioned by conventional TV. That has happened in Canada a couple of times and in the Nordics. So sometimes, to the other gentleman's point, it has to do with curating your audience, your community, proving that there is one, then being able to go broadcaster and ask for a full-blown commission. But as you had said, someone in the front, where's the difference? I think today with Chromecast, Roku, connected TVs, any quote web series can end up on the main screen living room anyway, so the production values and quality should already be at the highest level. If we're not in the days of thinking about shooting a film on our mobile for 5 cents or something now. Any other comments from the audience on that? Yes, sir. Over here in the front.
Hi, my name is Young-Gol Kim from South Korea, and I'd like to share with you an interesting case in Korea. You mentioned that for certain movies of genre, like horror movies or adult movies, they don't even need a theatrical opening. They can just hit the right community and niche market through the online. But in Korea, before 2013, there have been about 200 movies which opened on theater.
Sorry, say that again?
Before 2013, up until 2012, about 200 movies opened in the theaters. In 2013, about 800 movies opened in the theater. Quadrupled.
Amazing.
Can you
Gorgeous.
understand what's happening? But you don't understand. It's related to the pricing.
Right.
In a
Availability.
major Korea IPTV VODs, when the movie is featured simultaneously in the theater and DVDs at the same time,
Day and date.
then they can charge $10
Right.
per streaming, not purchasing. So $10 for online VOD is a very expensive price.
It is, yeah.
In some areas, it's more expensive than the theater ticket price, because in the rural areas, it's like $7, $8. So $10 nationally is a very premium price. Because of that, the little movies, which didn't even think about theatrical opening,
are getting
now they are going for 5 screens, 7 screens, 6 screens, and then put it to the telecom DVD players so that they can charge $10.
It's inspiring. Yeah.
So
Great.
the opposite thing is also happening. It's a crazy world.
We're all in the wrong region here. Yeah. That's great. So we're almost at the stage of wrapping up. One last question in a way for everyone. Perhaps corny, but really relevant for the room. Where do you see your platform and the industry going in the next 6 months to a year? Because I don't believe 5 years, 10 years, but you know, the short-term future, what are the most immediate changes coming down the pipeline for you, if you would share that with us? Yes.
To right to left. Go for it.
Okay.
For example, new regions or new genres or a different business model. Yeah.
So there is the vision of Wacky, first of all, which is, I think, the fact that we will be ourselves rolling out internationally in many more countries. We will be stronger on the smart TV side with huge investment on that side. We are going to launch 4K big time in the next few months. We already have few films in 4K being delivered in the main countries in Europe. Generally speaking, I think the business is going to move toward a more flexible windowing situation. for distribution of content. And whether it's TV or movies, that's the same.
Okay.
That's my...
Thank you.
Globally on the market, I would say tough competition for more than 6 months and consolidation of the market and the players for more than the next 6 months. This will be a long period of time. Adaptation of the practices in the whole sector, again, for much longer than the next 6 months, because things are advancing and moving, but this would take time. And regarding our network, consolidation as well, and the development of a pan-European label for VOD distribution, with the main members becoming more and more structured and establishing capitalistic links between themselves.
Okay.
So we will definitely have the VOD button in our website. We have right now a transmedia button that is inside for the videos. We want to develop a little bit more how you can get that experience that you can get for that transmedia button. And yeah, keep focusing how we can change the platform to be more adaptable for the region that we are working on. And if someone else were going to duplicate that in another country in the Latin America, we can happy to do that. Yeah.
Okay. And William?
I think in terms of the industry, we're going to continue to see growth as technology improves and infrastructure improves. I think there will be consolidation, at least in the main Hollywood more focused platforms. But I think, we're just going to continue to see VOD eventually overtake DVD and Blu-ray. I think day and date is possibly going to become a little bit more common, as there's a lot more data now available on the success of that, although there are still certain barriers. And the gentleman from South Korea, that's a very interesting case study, so maybe that'll become more popular and be used as an example. In terms of our company, we're going to build up our platform, continue to build up to about 1,000, 1,500 titles. And we're going to roll outside of the UK into other predominantly English-speaking markets, as opposed to European markets. And now also we're going to begin to really experiment with and develop some technology around curation and community to try and do things a little bit different to other VOD platforms.
So some takeaways, I guess, for the room, if you like these thoughts, instead of looking 5 years down the road, just looking at the next year, where you can exploit as many VODs as possible within the windows, but also the competing platforms. Don't look only at where the platforms are now, because they often start buying 6 months to a year and ahead of a region before they launch or announce the region. So keep circling back to what's around the corner rather than just what's in front of your eyes. I think the big point that everyone had was, don't just stop at the deal, but let your audiences know where to buy or find your film, social media, other form of community. Okay, thanks everyone for your attention and time. Thanks to the panel very much. Excellent.